Hello and welcome back to the Games Degree videos, the video series where we discuss some of the more niche and global games development and implementation topics throughout QUT's Games Degree. Today we will be discussing Scrum, the agile development methodology used for project management purposes to ensure projects stay on track. We will discuss it primarily as a reference for all units that utilize or encourage the use of Scrum, but also as a starting point for groups of students trying to get their head around it. By now you have likely been introduced to Scrum and are likely a bit confused about some of the lingo and processes required, so this video will help you get started with employing Scrum in an easy to understand manner. So, Scrum can be a very confusing methodology to learn about, especially if it is discussed in the traditional terms, using various farm animals to describe the level of involvement the stakeholders have regarding a project. A lot of these representations and general lingo do not really apply within the context of using Scrum within a small group project at a non-industry level. It is assumed, for the most part, that you are all equally involved in the project that you are working on. To ensure your game achieves its goals in a timely manner, your game is developed via an iterative or repeating process of working on the most important aspects of your game for the current cycle or sprint. A backlog of elements to be included in your game is kept, ordered by priority, and implemented over the course of multiple sprints. The time taken and efficiency of tasks is kept track of, affecting the time and resources spent on game elements in the next sprint. Anything outstanding or overdue from a previous sprint gets much higher priority, and consideration for the next one until it is complete. Translation: you will work on the most important elements of your game, dedicating the most time and resources to the most important tasks. As stated previously, Scrum at a small group university level requires some tweaks, especially regarding traditional roles. However, Scrum meetings are not about chilling out with your teammates, talking about the project in a disorganized and unproductive manner. If you do not approach Scrum meetings with a degree of seriousness, you will not get anything out of them. First of all, you may have a product owner who has the overarching vision of your game, but that person may in fact be part of your team. It is wise to have what's called a Scrum Master to ensure that your fortnightly Scrum meetings are conducted efficiently, who may also be part of your team. You should also have someone who makes a general record of what tasks are decided on, how long tasks are estimated to take, and any important comments that are made during the Scrum meeting. This person, commonly called a scribe, may, you guessed it, be part of your team as well. Everyone should be expected to participate in these roles where necessary, even rotating them as appropriate. Again, not taking this seriously means you won't get anything out of it. Your very first Scrum meeting will start by, if it doesn't already exist, developing a product backlog, an artifact which lists and sometimes prioritizes the most important elements of your game. Often it is useful to derive backlog elements via the use of player stories, or some technique of understanding your target demographic. You will then, as a team, decide upon and extract elements from the product backlog to work on in your very first sprint. As an example, the most important items on your product backlog for your first sprint may be a basic avatar that can move and jump, a simple level with an object to interact with, a camera system that tracks the player, and some preliminary testing on a basic combat mechanic. Notice here that we are not listing things like implementing a groovy soundtrack, lighting or particle effects, massively open and sprawling levels, 4K textures, menus, etc. None of these elements are important for the first build of your game. This is honestly where most groups start having problems. You need to decide right here as a group what is and is not important on a sprint-by-sprint basis. Working on unimportant game elements will result in major group conflict in the future. Once you have decided which backlog elements to implement, you should then delegate this work to members of your team. Ideally, this should be done voluntarily, based on your specific skill sets. Your programmers may work on the camera and movement mechanics, your artists on the avatar and basic animations, your designers on the level and early combat testing. Now, this is where groups make another big mistake, resulting in severe development problems later on. These tasks should not always be delegated just to individual members. A moving avatar is clearly the work of both animators and programmers, so they need to work together to implement this in your game. This does not mean, as an example, an animator developing a model and animations and then just dumping it onto your programmer to figure out how to get it all to work. Implementation is a two-way street, and communication and cooperation is vital for efficient progress. Delegated work should also be given a rough time estimate, usually given by the team members who have to do the work on the task themselves. At first, this time estimate will be a little rough. You may find you severely under or overestimate how long tasks will take, especially when working with others. This is okay. The point of Scrum is to identify these misunderstandings and rectify them in future sprints. Just don't be that guy who estimates poorly, sometimes intentionally, every time. We will get to that in a bit. After backlog tasks are delegated with appropriate time estimates, the sprint begins. During this time, you work on the task given to you to your best capacity. At QUT, we expect sprints to go for roughly 2 weeks before reconvening. During this time, you should make a note of how long you have worked on your tasks and how long you think it should take to finish them. This should not be an arduous process. Just take a couple of notes when you do some work. When the 2 weeks are almost up, just before you have your next Scrum meeting, you should send this information to your Scrum Master. This person now has the glorious task of representing your whole team's efficiency in what is called a burn down graph at the start of the next Scrum meeting. This is sometimes called the evaluation process. Essentially, the idea is to show how well you have all burnt down to 0 hours remaining on the tasks you were specifically given. Ideally, you should burn down to 0 just before the next meeting. Anyone who burnt down to 0 too soon is an indication of people, I guess, severely overestimating how long their tasks would take. And anyone who did not burn down to 0, an indication of underestimating. This is assuming that everyone has worked on tasks to their best capacity and have A, not been lazy, or B, intentionally overestimating to get out of doing work. These instances will become very clear to the Scrum Master and the rest of your team very quickly. Again, don't be that guy. Anything that did not burn down to 0 should be identified as a high priority game element, potentially flagged for implementation in the next sprint. The meeting now continues in the process described earlier, taking elements of high priority from the product backlog, delegating them to team members, and having a rough time estimate for the next sprint. The scribe records this information and the cycle continues. And that is all that Scrum really is. It's not that hard if you ask me, just a bit hard to understand without a few visual aids. A lot of students dislike employing Scrum because they are either A, confused or intimidated about the process, or B, do not think it will benefit the group work process at all. However, there is a good reason that many businesses, not just IT related, use Scrum to efficiently manage project development. It does work, you just need to take it seriously. And of course, don't be that guy. I hope you have enjoyed this video on Scrum and how to start using it within your game projects at QUT. If you have any questions, feel free to ask your tutors or ask in the comments section below.